Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 West Virginia After School Conference. I want to thank you all for being here, and also would like to thank the West Virginia Statewide After School Network for organizing this wonderful event, and to all the sponsors that are helping to offer this wonderful event to our after school staff in West Virginia at no cost. So thank you all very much. Hope you had a great time yesterday, and today we're chock full of different workshop sessions. I do have two announcements. The Leap into Science Educators Training, which is a 2-session workshop. You need to have do a pre-survey, and that pre-survey link will be put into this chat at some time during the plenary. So please go click on that link if you plan on attending the Leap into Science workshops and fill that out. Secondly, we have a program evaluation, and it's on the home page right next to the workshop sessions at the very top tab. So please go in there today and do an evaluation for us. We also have a couple of polls this morning to get us started. If we could have the first poll for folks to do, I'd appreciate that, Tim. The first poll is, we would like to know about you. How long have you been working in after school? So we have less than a year, 1 to 5, 5 to 10, or more than 10. I'll give you guys another second or two. We're ending the poll. Wow. Looks like we have, I'm going to share results. We have over 33% that are more than 10 years. If you are more than 10 years, go ahead and just type in the chat how many years you have. It's always neat to see. I wonder how many of you have hit maybe 15 or 20 or spent your entire career in after school and taking care of kids. Oh, I see a 21-year-old, 14, 15, 12, 13, 37. Wow. 18, fantastic. 39, 11 years. Wonderful. Special thank you to all of you that are spending your careers and working with our students, because you are making a huge difference in their lives. So I thank you personally for that. That's wonderful. Okay. And as we have a couple of more polls, we have one more poll actually. This one is, what is your perception of after school benefits to students? So if we could have that other poll back up here, and you can actually select more than one. If you're very new, you may not have any idea of, maybe you need to ask your parents and families about the benefits. Some you help working parents by providing a safe place. Another choice is students receive homework help and tutoring, and they play and get physical education. Some of them offer positive social interaction and fun enrichments. And some of you say that your program is vital to the well-being. And you can select more than one. So I'll give you another few seconds there. So we have about 79 of 131, about 60%. Let's see if we can get a couple more folks to click. Looks like we're done. We're right in this poll. I'm going to share results. I love this. It shows that all of you have a good understanding of what your after school provides to the students and families that we serve. So that's fantastic. Everything from safe place to academic enrichments to a positive social environment. And then also your program's vital. Our programs are vital. All after school programs are vital to families that are trying to live wonderful in our neighborhood. Okay, I think we're about finished. All righty, I'm going to stop. Okay, great. All righty, we are finished with our polls, and I know we have an exciting workshop today for the plenary. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jillian Luchner. She's a policy manager at the Afterschool Alliance. The Afterschool Alliance, of course, is a nonprofit research and advocacy organization with a mission to provide affordable, accessible, out-of-school time opportunities that meet the needs of our youth. In her role, she tracks federal and state and local funding streams that support out-of-school time programming. She has a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Economics and Political Science and a Master in Public Policy, and she specializes in the education policy. So we're very, very lucky to have her today. And with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let Jillian get started. Thanks, Jillian.
Thank you, Sherry. Good morning, and thank you so much for letting me all join you this morning for this important conference. Our team at the Afterschool Alliance has really been tremendously proud of the work of the after-school and summer community, always, but especially since the pandemic hit. We've seen a real growing recognition of the importance of after-school providers for youth and families, all because of the work of people like you that are participating in this session today. So really, just thank you. And we hope that we can continue to help you navigate the policies, the funding, and the support that you need to continue doing what you do, growing and evolving alongside our youth. Okay, so do we have our slides up? All right, next slide, please. As the presentation title notes, it's been a truly unprecedented year for the after-school community. So I'm going to do my best to compress the last year and all the upcoming opportunities into the next 40 minutes, while also really working to learn and hear from you. And I'll be referencing materials that, because of the speed of the conversation, hopefully you'll be able to just return to and explore more later. So I apologize if things seem a little bit quick. The presentation is planned in 5 parts, really what we've seen from our organization's surveys about the after-school field, funding that supports after-school and summer, how understanding the focus and purpose of recent funding can help you tap into the opportunity, steps that can help you move forward in response to the opportunities, and also the other opportunities that are coming on the horizon, and what it really looks like to take an important moment in our work, even in the midst of challenges, to celebrate and showcase all the good. So please, as I present, feel free to share your perspectives, your challenges and questions in the chat. And if I don't get to all of them or can't answer them during this time, I'll follow up either personally in an email or with a FAQ to respond. So in the next poll, I wanted to continue the questions of just learning who is here with us this morning. So who is represented this morning? Can you put up that poll? So if you see yourself represented here, please feel free to answer. If you're not, you can also put your answer in the chat. All right, take another moment. Okay, wonderful. So it looks like a really nice split between staff, administration, and then some technical assistants and state level administrators like Sherry here on the call. So thank you very much. We'll end poll, share results, so you can all see what I'm seeing. And then we're gonna move on. So I really love the idea of just having a diverse range of people, practitioners, policymakers, administrators, and other voices to get a good conversation going. And I'm really glad to just be here with all of you. So on the next slide, the fields of after school and summer has really been deeply challenged since the pandemic, but also has been immensely creative and perhaps more important than ever for our youth. I could certainly tell you myself, but you all know this viscerally. And also I wanted to bring the voices of our youth serve to tell you, to tell the story better. So can we play the video?
It's really cool how like hundreds of people are all on my side.
We went hiking on the big mountain in New Hampshire, and that was like the highlight of my life.
It's more of a learning through, I guess, adventure in a way. You kind of get to pick and choose how you want to learn.
It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what your background is, or where you're headed. It gives that opportunity to everybody.
It has helped multiple people because they're doing what an after-school program is meant to do, which is to help the kids learn when they're out of school.
Handy has allowed me to see these opportunities and these different aspects of life that, you know, a normal average child would not be able to experience if they did not have the funding to do so.
Great. So that's the voices of the children that we're serving every day. Just speaking out about what these programs mean to them. And for youth in a quality accessible program, we can really imagine stories like these being with each of them. But we also know that not all youth have these stories or even access to a program at all. In The next slide, please. In March 2020, right before the pandemic shut things down, we completed our most recent America After 3 p.m. survey of parents in every state across the country. We learned that demand for after-school programs nationally continues to grow, and there are almost 25 million youth who would like access to an after-school program, but don't have one available. Next slide. This growth in demand can most likely be seen as a combination of a really positive trend, which is an increased understanding of the importance of these opportunities for all our youth, but also a more challenging one, that barriers to access are increasing. This slide shows some national data, but we also have the ability to drill down and look specifically at what's happening in West Virginia. Next slide. Well, nationally, for every one youth in an after-school program, there are 3 more waiting to get in. In West Virginia, that number is even higher. For every youth in an after-school program, 4 more would like access. Next slide. And while that, of course, is a big concern, we can start by thinking high demand is also in many ways a big compliment to those in the room, because parents really like your programs. 97% of parents with a child in an after-school program in West Virginia are satisfied with their child's experience. Moreover, they really love the staff. 97% are satisfied that their program has knowledgeable and caring staff. Next slide. And while it's not a competition, it's worth mentioning also about the staff that the national number for staff satisfaction, while also high, is currently at 89%. So just for West Virginia, that 97% deserves a real pat on the back. It's also nice to know that after-school programs in your state are not just great for youth and families on their own, but they also build strong connections to students' school day learning. This becomes even more meaningful in the context of the available funding that we're going to discuss in a bit, some of which focuses on helping students and families re-engage in learning after a year of lost instructional time. 76% of West Virginia parents say their children's after-school program helps them become more excited about learning and take greater interest in school. And 71% believe the program itself helps those parents build connections to their students' school day education. Next slide. Yet in some challenging news for the state, the percentage of students participating in after school in West Virginia since the last America After 3 p.m. in 2014 has actually gone down. And on the next slide, when we look at some barriers, we really may have some answers as to why. The number of parents reporting that after school programs were too expensive to afford rose from 31% in the 2014 survey to 50% in 2020. Those that mentioned after school programs were not even accessible or available in their communities rose from 23% to 41%. 51% were reporting issues of transportation as a barrier, which was only 31% in the past. And challenges to finding a program with those operational hours that would meet parents' needs increased from 26 to 41%. So these barriers are just especially important to consider in light of your high state demand. On the next slide, I just want to put a quick plug here that all this data is on our America After 3 p.m. webpage, especially drilling down to the state, as well as other additional data on summer programming and STEM programming and other special reports. So please feel free to take a look. Okay, on the next slide, we know that this America After 3 p.m. data was collected in March 2020. On the next slide, please. But then, of course, we know that COVID happened right afterwards. And so I don't really have to tell you how that compounded problems for access and availability. On the next slide, so during this time, we reached out with additional polling to programs in the field to understand some of the impacts. Last year at this conference, we reported on some of the earlier findings. And at this point, we've completed wave 5 of provider surveys and are going to embark on a 6th wave later in the fall. So I hope that you'll participate if you can. As of our most recent poll in summer 2021, we learned some positive news. Most programs are continuing to offer support with a full range of academic and non-academic supports for youth. And a majority of respondents were doing that work in coordination and communication with their school districts, which really goes a long way in helping parents and students feel they have access to the supports they need in an often chaotic and overwhelming time. On the next slide, we also, not surprisingly, learned of the great challenges programs have faced in being able to stay open and operational. Among them is the large challenge in the field to find and fill roles with qualified staff, and the different operational challenges faced by higher and lower income programs. You can definitely find more detail on these surveys on our web pages. On the next slide. But despite all of these challenges over the last year, as you're probably aware, the field was really also met with this enormous moment of opportunity. All right, next slide. So as a quick refresher on non-COVID relief funds at the federal level, there are a few ongoing commitments to meet the high need for after-school and summer programs. As you may be aware, however, those federal funding streams are not nearly sufficient to meet demand. And the majority of program funding, about 75%, comes from parent fees. As you know, the 2 major federal funding streams are the 21st Century Community Learning Center program, which is funded at about $1.25 billion nationally and serves about 1.6 million youth, and the Child Care Development Block Grant Program, CCDBG, or also known as CCDF Fund, which is about $6 billion in discretionary funds and serves about 600,000 school-age youth. So that's a little over 2 million youth served, but this is with a national demand of 25 million. There's also a number of other smaller funding streams. So you have mentoring money in the Office of Juvenile Justice, money for AmeriCorps volunteers, excuse me, who can help as program staff. There's money to reimburse summer meals, after school meals and snacks from the Department of Agriculture, and additional money in education from Title I funding or Title IV-A funding, which are the student success and enrichment funds that can be allowable for after school. Even career and technical education has allowable uses for after school. And then there are also other agencies that participate in funding opportunities for after school as well, like NASA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and parks. So the Afterschool Alliance has a funding database that aims to outline these opportunities and how to connect. And those interested can always also reach out to our team to learn more. On the next slide, we can look specifically at West Virginia. And so the state gets about 7.5 million in 21st century funds and serves about 10,512 students as of the last reporting that I saw. And the state gets about 37 million in the CCDBG funds, which is spread out between children ages 0 to 13. So therefore, even with the large allocation, it's reaching about 4,385 school-age children per month. Next slide. But this year, those were not the only major funds available. So as the other headlines I presented showed the many issues exacerbated by the pandemic, these headlines show how the after-school fields continually stepped up and stepped in to fill important roles and offer needed supports. Again, you know this, but it's just a really key piece in the story. And it includes even the work that was done this summer to help that large population of students re-engage with learning in social settings, and even the work being done right now as trusted messengers in communities to discuss the science of vaccines and provide information for families. Next slide. So as you know, the federal government responded big time in a number of pieces of legislation, but mainly since we last presented here in 2 large pieces of legislation at the K-12 level, the Coronavirus Relief and Recovery Supplemental Act, or CRSA, that was passed in December 2020, and the large and historic American Rescue Plan Act, known as ARP, passed in March of this year. And in good news, the legislation, especially the ARP legislation, really recognized the contributions of after-school and summer youth development fields. As a result of these laws, federal K-12 education funding increased by about $180 billion, which sounds like a lot because it is a lot. Annual funding was only about $26 billion prior to the pandemic. And this additional funding can be used, and we're going to talk about this a little more later, for after school and summer programs, including 21st century. On the next slide, we also saw within these 2 pieces of legislation that childcare funding increased by an additional $50 billion, where it was only $6 billion prior. Again, this funding, which is split into a CCDF supplemental fund and stabilization grants, can be used for a variety of purposes, including school age and license exempt providers. Next slide, please. So in West Virginia, this is a really good amount of money representing a great opportunity. The ARP K-12 funds, also known as ESSER $3, have a few mandatory set-asides at the state level, including 1% of the total allocation of funds specifically for comprehensive after school and another 1% for summer enrichment. You can see that 7.6 million each for these purposes. In addition, there's another 5% state set aside for learning loss remediation. And the law specifically mentions that learning loss remediation can be supported by investments in after school and summer programs. 90% of that ARP allocation of those ESSER 3 funds are designated to go by law directly to districts for a very broad range of uses, as mentioned, which can include 21st century, after school, and summer. And of that money, 20% must be used for learning loss, which again has specific mention of after school and summer support. So with district funding at 90% in ESSER 3, a lot of the work to spend the funds is happening at that local level. And just for a sense of timeline, the ESSER 3 funds must be obligated by September 2024. For childcare funds, the state will be receiving its ARP dollars as an additional $260 million, including $100 million for pretty much anything childcare development block grant related in the supplemental, which includes some additional flexibilities in how these funds are spent. And these must be obligated by 2023, and also another $160 million for stabilization grants, which support providers, including potentially school age and license exempt providers who are operational or temporarily closed at the time the law was passed in March. And these funds should be obligated by 2022. So these conversations are really ongoing and happening at state agency levels. Next slide. In addition to the K-12 and childcare increases, the ARP made a large investment in state and local governments in their fiscal recovery funds. It committed $350 billion nationally, which can be used for areas such as relief to nonprofits, aid to impacted industries, or increases in premium pay for essential workers. We've already seen instances of these funds used for after-school programs. For state and local governments in West Virginia, I believe the first amount of this funding came out in May 2021, and the second is expected in May 2022. So these conversations are occurring at state, county, and city levels. All this funding is in addition to the prior rounds of ESSER funds, governor's funds provided in the first and second relief bills, and childcare funds in the earlier bills as well. So there is money available, quite a lot of it, over a somewhat extended period of time. And after school, summer, and school age programs are really more than eligible. They're often a key highlighted piece in response to recovery and the conversation. On the next slide, I just want to have a poll of program funding and just look across the people who are on this webinar today and see how, in what ways are your program funded. So you can check more than one and just all that apply to just showcase the diversity of funding streams that may be in this conversation today. All right, and just want to give people another couple seconds to respond. Then I can share the poll. All right, about 5 more seconds. We're still getting in a few more responses and okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. So let's share these results. So what you can see here is that there is a nice kind of diversity of funding sources and funding streams. So it's really great to have kind of a conversation with this group in this webinar today. The parent fees, as you can see, is the largest. And then you have 21st century and community development block grants, other federal funds, COVID relief, and philanthropy. By sharing the stories of how you're funded, you can help other programs and agencies really think creatively about how to sustain these programs. So thank you for answering. All right. Okay, on the next slide. Oh, thank you for actually putting in the chat some additional ways that you're funded. I really appreciate that. On the next slide, we talk about now that the funds are available, the real important part, which is how they're actually being spent. The U.S. Department of Education has issued a number of pieces of guidance in regards to the ESSER spending, including the release of 2 COVID handbooks and a frequently asked questions document, as well as strategies documents, including strategies for using the ARP funds for lost instructional time. Guidance from the department emphasizes a number of key areas for spending, including focusing on collaboration with community partners, coordination for wraparound services, ensuring that support covers all the social, emotional, academic, and mental health needs of our youth, ensuring the most vulnerable populations are reached first, and grounding decisions in research and an evidence base, as well as the importance of diversity and cultural relevancy. Many of the articles of guidance specifically call out after school, including the ability of partnerships with community organizations to sustain programs and resources, and the research base that shows high quality after school has impacts on student outcomes ranging from academics to self-confidence to graduation. The guidance also mentions that schools with community partnerships to expand learning outside the classroom can build strong ties to family and communities. Research found that schools with strong ties to these groups were 4 times more likely than other schools to make significant gains in students' reading and math. Next slide. Similarly, the Office of Childcare has a number of resources on the uses of these ARP funds as well, including guidance on the CCDF supplemental and the stabilization grants. The Office of Childcare discusses a number of opportunities within these new funds, including increased uses of grants and contracts to help with program stability and reaching underserved populations, working with intermediaries to support a broad variety of providers, increasing eligibility for CDBG funds and participation in the quality rating systems, updating data systems, and supporting mental health. There's also a very significant focus on how to consider the true cost of childcare, meaning not just what parents can afford, which is often represented by a market rate, but can leave staff really significantly underpaid, but what it really actually costs to sustain a high quality program with well-paid, well-trained staff. And additionally, for our field, the Office of Childcare also mentions the intention to ensure these funds are accessible to a broad range of providers, all of whom were important during the pandemic and will be essential to economic recovery. The guidance recommends specifically that school age programs be included in stabilization subgrants and that license exempt school age programs be supported, which could mean where applicable meeting relevant requirements for CCDF participation and supporting those funds with the supplemental. So on the next page, the next slide, this isn't a formal poll, but this is just an opportunity to reflect for a moment as a field. We're at a point where we not only have funding, but we really have this great focus and conversation about what the field truly needs to succeed and thrive on behalf of youth, on behalf of families, behalf of staff, and even program sustainability. So if you want, I just wanted people to take a moment and write in the chat which of these things resonates with them, what excites them, where they want to see the focus, or where they're actually placing the focus if they've received some of these relief funds. So if everybody could just take a moment and just look through these words or think about words kind of on your own top, priority list, and just write in the chat, what conversation should we be having now that this opportunity is in front of us? Living wage, serving the underserved, focusing on quality, diversity, wonderful. Mental health, really trying to accelerate learning. Again, living wage and mental health again, making sure they're affordable. Underserved, this is great. You can actually see how as a field, we're going to come out of this stronger because everybody is focusing on so many elements of this opportunity: mental health, community partnerships, community engagement, even though it's challenging. Thank you, Christina, that's right. Sometimes the work is hard. Expand participation, the career ladder. Amy, it's wonderful. All of the social, emotional, and behavioral. Yes, especially for those hard to reach students and the at-risk students, and access to technology. Wonderful, yeah. There's one that hasn't been on the list. Thank you for bringing that up. Parent engagement, workforce, grants and contracts. Yes. Wonderful. I appreciate all this participation. This is great. So thank you all for communicating in the chat. And again, I really hope that we continue to kind of highlight and raise up these ideas and move the field forward with these opportunities. So now you can continue typing in the chat even as we move on, because we'll be looking at these ideas even after this conversation. So on the next slide, I just thought we would quickly take a look now at what states are doing with the opportunity and the funds and the guidance that are out. So even though it's a bit later than when this slide was created, we're still at 49 states that submitted their ESSER plans. I think we're waiting still on Florida. And states had to submit and have these plans approved in order to receive their final third of the ARP ESSER funding. So looking across states, we saw that 25 states, in fact, in their big state plans had proposed funding for their 1% comprehensive after-school dollars that included important community partnerships and working with community partners. Another 19 integrated partnerships in their 1% set aside for summer enrichment, and 14 states coordinated in some manner with their statewide after-school networks. On the next slide, we look at the childcare piece. In childcare, states were submitting their CCDF 2022 to 2024 state plans around the time ARP funding was made available. And so they were really able to think in their plans about how those funds could be integrated into those 3 years. In the state plans, 31 mentioned work to support the positive development of school-age children. 23 mentioned including school-age in their QRIS systems. 18 mentioned either having school-age specific standards or being in the process of working towards them. And 4 were offering grants and contracts for school-age providers. And on the next slide, we look, in addition to those kind of broad strokes, those top line numbers, it's really fun to kind of look at the details of how states are innovating with the funds from both funding streams. And since we have 50 states, we always have some really great examples of things we can look at and learn from across the country. So this slide has a lot of text, but it's really kind of connected to blogs that you can find on our web pages that outline more of the details of these funds. And in the interest of time, I'll just highlight a few examples here, according to the state's plans for ESSER or CCDBG. So Georgia used its ARP ESSER funds and combined that after school and summer state set aside and created a grant program specifically to community-based providers. They had one string of grants for larger providers with statewide reach and another for small local providers. And the grants also included support for quality improvements among grantees. And the entire program is provided in coordination with the state's after-school network. Illinois is developing grants with the specific intention of helping school districts, community-based partners, and local health partners to coordinate. New Hampshire established a summer fund to ensure that all staff interacting with youth during summer programs will be trained in how to identify and respond to mental and behavioral health issues of campers. I see a lot of people in the chat writing about mental health. So again, there are opportunities to learn from what other states are doing or to raise up what you're doing in your community so that others can learn from you. Other states are funding a school age specialist to focus on school age specific licensing and technical assistance needs, offering school age specific training courses in areas such as back to school, the identity alphabet, and the promise of adolescence, separate from those trainings that are often offered to early care and toddlers and infants within CCDF funds, or expanding work and professional development around quality out of school time standards. And there's also work being done in youth voice and data sharing and even helping build a diverse teacher pipeline by having some placements in out of school time and making those important and informative experiences. So again, it's just a really exciting time and we have the will and the resources to really move ideas forward and even the field forward as well. On the next slide, this is kind of where we are now. We're right on the verge of the future. So we can take what we have and just move into kind of our next steps. And then I also want to just mention on this one a few things that we might expect on the policy landscape. So on the next slide, the first thing to really think about is that work of implementation on all these funds we discussed. It is a work in progress. So we at the national level, programs at the local level, and everyone in between who really understands the importance and value of after school, school age, and summer programs really has to continue to make sure we're at the table, that we're heard, and that we're recognized. Hopefully, if you haven't yet, you'll reach out to your local principals, superintendents, teachers, parents, school boards to discuss the work you do and how to collaborate with the available funds. And as people mentioned in the chat, sometimes it can be hard, but it's important. Reach out to local government too. You could write an op-ed on your program and how funding could help. If you have a plan to really make your program stronger and more sustainable, serve more children, break down barriers to access, support your staff, help students and families recover and thrive, you can pay staff more, offer benefits, just communicate that at the state and local level. And I want to be clear that this work isn't lobbying. The funds have already been legislated. So suggesting that funds be used for your program with a good rationale for why just helps decision makers really choose from the best options available for how to support students. And remember also that that fund guidance shows that community partners should be key players in this work. So your voice really helps make that happen. This slide has points that you already know about the after school field. It's just that they align so well with the needs of the moment that it helps to really think through them again. So when you're doing your outreach, you can really lean on any of these or other talking points that suit your program to talk about how your work supports these larger goals of us as a nation right now and the purposes of these funding streams. There's that need for research-based practice, which the after school field has decades of evidence on youth development practices. It's supporting that full suite of student needs, combining that academic with that social and emotional, and really connecting and being trusted as community partners with families and other community players that can bring together resources, and being able to sit with that youth-centered focus so that you can work across funding streams and focus on the youth rather than necessarily be specific to one funding stream or one type of outcome for youth at a time. So we really have a lot of benefits that we're bringing to the table right now. And we at the Afterschool Alliance are also going to be collecting examples of how these funds are used well. And so these are the examples that you guys are all creating in the field in real time. And we want to showcase these examples. Congress is already looking for examples of how these historic investments have made positive change. Even from this summer, we just have a number of really exciting examples. We have programs that were able to serve 10 times the usual number of students in new underserved areas or for no charge. We have programs that are hiring mental health professionals to support students and staff. We're paying older youth to return to programs that they've attended in the past as staff. Libraries that are able to build stronger ties with families and communities, increase their membership. STEM learning happening through mobile vehicles or outdoor education, just a number of really wonderful examples already. And we're looking forward to collecting many more. Okay, on the next slide. So with ARP in the implementation phase, we can actually look at other federal legislation that hasn't been passed yet, but is on the horizon. And of course, thank goodness, on September 30th, we did not have a government shutdown. So we're operating now under a continuing resolution, which extended the annual appropriations process through December 3rd. And Congress is going to be deciding on its funding levels for fiscal year 2022. So it started when President Biden put out his budget early in the year, and his budget proposal proposed a $50 million increase for 21st century and a $1.5 billion increase for childcare development block grant funds, among other funding areas. And then the House bill came out in July and passed through the full House, and that actually included a $100 million increase for 21st century. So going beyond the Biden proposal really to meet more of the need that we've been talking about in the field. It also included a number of the president's requested increases, including $1.5 billion for the childcare development block grant, a very historic $19.5 billion increase for Title I, which is more than double what the program is getting now, and a $413 million increase for community schools. The Senate hasn't put out their version of the bill yet, and since the Senate's bill will require, bipartisan support of at least that 60 votes, there's still really a lot of unknowns about ultimately where these funding levels will end up. On the next slide, in addition to that appropriations bill, there's also that additional reconciliation bill that you've heard so much about, and that's still on the table. So that's the bill that's based on Biden's American Families Plan and a few elements of the American Jobs Plan as well. And Democrats are hoping to pass it through reconciliation in order to kind of only need a simple majority of Senate votes. So known as the Build Back Better Act, the bill passed the House in late August and includes really major provisions for childcare, including a childcare entitlement for children ages 0 to 5, universal pre-K, as well as additional tax benefits and childcare infrastructure provisions that would offer some support for older children as well. From a school age perspective, the bill includes a provision that any state that would opt into that 0 to 5 new entitlement program would have a CCDBG cap of 10% for that 0 to 5 age group. So the school age population, which wouldn't be supported by the entitlement, would still have some additional support. And we'll be seeing where all this goes moving forward. On the next slide, we still have a few additional pieces of legislation that we're watching and working on for the possibility of passage. And one of them is the Summer Meals Act, which is a bipartisan piece of legislation that would drop area eligibility from 50% low income thresholds to a 40% low income threshold, which would increase access to these meals. And so you can see that every blue area on this map would be included if that were to happen, so that every blue and green area would be eligible for these services. It would also streamline applications between summer and after school meal programs. And on the next slide, we're also following the Youth Workforce Readiness Act, which is another bipartisan piece of legislation that would create a competitive grant program at the U.S. Department of Labor, which would be eligible to after-school programs to support skills development and job readiness. So things that we know are really important to our youth. So on the next slide, we're into our new section. We are on section 5, and this is it, the section that's on fun. And because with all this data on unmet demand, stresses of navigating the pandemic, there's the enormous size of the opportunity that may be ahead. Sometimes it's important to just step back and celebrate. And so this state, again, has that 97% satisfaction rate, and there's just a lot to celebrate. The work you do is amazing. And as many of you know, once a year in the fall, the Afterschool Alliance hosts Lights On After School. So you can go to the next slide, please. Here we are, Lights On After School. It's a national and even international, South Africa is participating this year, celebration of programs. And the goal is simply to shine a light on your work, from something as simple as taking a picture for Twitter with a light bulb over your head, to a battle of the bands, an event where you showcase youth voice, a dance off, just opening the doors at your program or online or anything in between. And we have a really fun webpage of ideas and webinars on how to host events. And for those of you who heard from Tiana and Charlotte on our team yesterday in the session, you're probably full of awesome new ideas as well. And you can also share things that you've done in the past that have been successful. It's a really fun way to just get word out about the importance of these programs and let our youth shine. The other benefit is that when your community knows what you do, and when your parents know, and when your teachers know, and when decision makers and legislators know, even if it's just a sliver of what you do, it helps sustain the energy and attention for these programs moving forward. We have so many examples in the field of after-school supporters who became enduring champions of programs after seeing them in person and understanding the impact of what they do. So whether you participated in Lights On in the past or not, you probably have taken some role in telling the story of your program or the importance of after-school and summer programming. And I thought we could take a moment here and share how we all communicate that story. For example, if no one knew we existed, we could have the best program and the greatest outcomes and still might not be able to find funding or partners. And our stories are really not only fun to tell, but they're just a key pillar of a sustained success. So on the next slide, I just have a quick poll that we can all share with one another, ways that we have, well, it's not a slide, actually, it's a poll. Thanks, Tim, if you could just put up the telling our story poll. A slide that just allows us to share ways that we've told our story. And feel free to share also in the chat, interesting things that you've done, ways that you've communicated, things that have been successful for you as you've told your story in the past. Oh, a Facebook page. Yes, excellent. Social media. Yes, very important. Wonderful. All right, social media presence. Good. I'm going to give another couple seconds on the poll and then I can share it with everybody. Word of mouth. Yeah, word of mouth is enormously important. From happy families. Yes, wonderful. Lots of Facebook. Okay, let's go ahead and end the poll. Share the results. And so now you can see this is great. People participating in Lights On After School, doing newsletters to the community, really helping inform them of the great work that's being done, kind of integrating across those spaces of community, school, and programs, articles in the newspapers, presentations at conferences, communication with elected officials, just the full range. And so it's great to share these ideas with one another, share it with another program, and help each other to tell that story loud and clear. So thank you all for the work that you do to continue communicating. All right, so I think you can all see that poll. All right, hopefully you can all see this poll. And now we're just going to finish up the presentation. So, oops, here we go. So I definitely do imagine that this was kind of a lot of information for you all this morning. And especially it is so early in the morning. But on the next slide, I do want to mention that, the Afterschool Alliance tries to be helpful with resources that we hope will help your work. And so we have a number of resources that are here that are on our webpage. And if you have a hard time navigating or just don't want to take the time to navigate, honestly, feel free to send us an email. We love knowing our resources are being used and are happy to help you identify anything you might need to make your work easier. The Help Kids Recover page is a new page that we put up during the COVID emergency that really helps to talk about the American Rescue Plan funding and ways it can be utilized for K-12 and ways it is being utilized at the state and local level. And it has information even on your district allocations for the ARP ESSER funds. We have a COVID resources page, including one-pagers to make the case for quality after school and evidence base, school-age childcare page. We even have resources on staff recruitment because we've certainly heard from the field that this is a pressing need and wanted to be responsive. And we will also try to continually update our blogs and try to be current there so you can learn more about those upcoming federal legislation packages and other things that are happening in the moment, as well as stories from other programs and other interesting pieces of information. So on the next slide, I know we've just taken a poll, but I'd actually like to if we could just put the poll in here, is just thinking about what resources we have. I just want to use this opportunity to ask what resources you think you might need. So there's a poll that I have called Next Steps. And I'm just curious to know, again, those of you here, what would be helpful to you to have as resources as we continue to identify what resources we've already made that might be useful or create new resources to help be responsive to what you need as a field. And this is an important one for all of us, hopefully for me, certainly, and for the work I do. So I'm going to take a little bit extra time, give you all a couple extra seconds to answer this one. So I can really see what your needs are. It looks like people are still continuing to think about this and answer. All right, another couple of seconds. People are continuing to respond. Okay, wonderful. Looks like responses are still coming in. All right, wonderful, great. Like I said, this is really important for us to understand. So definitely worth investing the time. And thank you for taking this time with me. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and end the poll and share the results. And so what you can see is that more information on federal funds that are available is really important. So you're welcome to connect with me. I can send some follow-up, but I want to share, the links to that funding database I mentioned, as well as our blogs. And if you have a particular opportunity or area of interest your program is working in, specific populations, you can certainly reach out to us and let us know, and we can try to identify federal funding sources and other funding sources that may be available. Telling stories to local decision makers, really important work. We actually have a sample letter to principals that we can share with you if that's something you're interested in. We can share with you op-eds that other people have written that maybe you could look at as a model for your own program. Reaching out to state and local decision makers. Again, we have a number of resources that may be able to help you with that. So please, please, please continue to stay connected with both the network, with Susan at your network and her team, as well as with our team, and we can help you just with the communication piece of just letting the work that you do shine. And hosting a Lights On event, I'd love to share the link for how to look at all of our resources and attend that webinar, which is recorded on our website. So wonderful. So yes, I'm going to share my email, and please reach out about public funds. All right, so I'll stop sharing there. And so on this slide here, I just really want to close with a cheer for all of you. From our America After 3 p.m. findings and maybe your own experiences as well, it's really clear that West Virginia really strongly supports after-school programs. And moreover, the parents in the state really support the idea that after-school programs should be accessible to everyone, which includes making that investment of public funds. So at this moment, we actually have some extra public funds available and that high demand, and therefore just this really wonderful opportunity. And again, I don't need you to take this all from me. I wanted to end the way I began, which is sharing kind of some voices from youth across the country, describing what this means to them. So if we could just share the final video, and then I'll be closing the presentation.
After-school programs give kids a leeway so that they don't have to be stuck in an unhealthy environment.
They could feel alone or isolated, and I can relate to that.
It also just helps you try to forget about those bad things that happen in your life. It helps you feel free.
We are depending on them to lead us the right way in terms of education.
Having youth voices in spaces about education or anything youth related is pretty important.
We do want to be heard. Just include us.
Education is a huge part of our lives.
After school programs are vital and important, and we need funding to make sure that it can be sustainable for all.
All right, wonderful. Thank you all so much for sticking with me this morning. That's the end of my presentation. On the last slide, you'll see my email, and I look forward to continuing this conversation and continuing to follow and support the great work of the state and the work of each of you as this moment of opportunity unfolds.
Jillian, thank you so much for coming and sharing this wonderful resource of information to all of us in West Virginia. We really appreciate you and the work that Afterschool Alliance does on behalf of after school across our nation. I want to take a little opportunity. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the question and answer or the chat really quickly. And then we have a few minutes that Jillian can answer some questions. Okay. So you mentioned about so many of these funding streams. Can they be used in combination, or do they have to be used separately?
That's a question that we get quite often. So they actually can be used in combination. So there's the element of braiding where you kind of keep the funding streams and the reporting, as you know, Sherry, kind of separate, but then you can use these to really build out your program. And so what we've seen programs do is maybe use, some kind of funding to run their program and additional funding to maybe give those extra staff pay or staff benefits, and a different funding source that can be used for maybe that transportation piece that's so important that we saw as a barrier. And so there are resources like the National Center for After School and Summer Enrichment, NCASE, which has a brief on how to braid and work through some of these funding streams. And the American Rescue Plan funding streams are designed to be used in combination with these funds. So if that answers the question, I hope that's helpful.
Yes, it does. I do know that at the state level, we had a Summer Soul program, which was some of the money from ESSER and whatnot, and that was able to be used to expand summer programming across our state. And they, I know 21st Century funds were able at the local level to be used to focus and expand summer programs that would not normally be here. So I think that is a wonderful aspect of that, the money for ESSER and ARP, which is really good. Okay, so someone else has a question saying, I keep hearing about extra money, but no one has reached out, and I don't know how my school district is using them. So what are ways that they maybe can find out how their state or local school districts are using the funds?
That's another great question, and one that also we get a lot. So this money is kind of rolling out from the federal government to the states and to the districts, but different districts are kind of resourcing the money at different times. And so don't be discouraged. Continue to be at the table, having those conversations with district leaders, telling them about the work that you do and the ways that you can use that money to meet the goals. And when that money does become available, if the school boards know what you're doing, if the parents know what you're doing, there's a real great opportunity for those funds to be used for programs like yours, especially because some of the legislation requires certain stakeholders to be at the table. And so if you're talking to those principals, those superintendents, those parents, when they are in these conversations, they'll certainly hopefully be an advocate just like you are, because they recognize your value for use. And yeah, I do see a couple other funds in the chat. The other thing I just want to say on that is, like people said when they said share their story, continue to use those local newspapers, op-eds, talk about the work you're doing, that this funding is available, how much maybe your district is getting, and ways that you think that you can coordinate and be a real partner in using those funds to successfully support students.
Yeah, and in the chat, one of the questions is, since there's a high demand for after-school programs, is there funding available to open more program locations?
So Sherry, maybe you and I can tag team on this one, but the short answer is yes, absolutely. That's exactly the intention of this funding, is that they recognize that COVID has created this year and this experience for students that's unlike no other, where their education was interrupted in a way that needs to kind of be responded to. And so we need to reach a much greater population of students than we ever had. And so like we showed, the demand was already great, but now the goal is to reach so many more students so that we can all help them recover and really advance in their learning, but also their social, emotional, and mental health recovery. So yes, absolutely. But Sherry, I'd love to see if you want.
Well, from Department of Ed, the extra funds for after school and summer programs were sent directly to the local school districts. So West Virginia is very much a state with a lot of local control at the county districts level, so you need to contact them. We do have at the state 21st Century Funds, and we just went through a round of funding in July that started a new set of grants, but we always have an RFP that will usually be issued out in February or March of every year, and it's due usually in May. So anyone, no matter if you're a nonprofit or a school district or any other entity, you're eligible to apply for these. Oh, we have more. Are there funds available for private schools and childcare centers?
Again, yes, especially in the kind of the childcare guidance, they really talk about the sustaining the childcare field. So to get parents working again, especially many of those women that we know stepped out of the workforce during the pandemic to, have children at home, or if there were family members they needed to care for, or if schools were closed, to get them back working, the federal government and the agencies, the Office of Childcare, has really recognized that all programs need to be part of the solution, and have certainly made the funds available to any program that's eligible under, Child Care Development Block Grant funding. And also the stabilization grants are open to any program that serves childcare 0 to 13 that was kind of operating under CCDF regulations at the time that would need to be sustained. So absolutely, funding can be used for all these types of providers. And again, the education money similar has some opportunities depending on how the state orchestrates it. For different types of providers, but the childcare money I would certainly look at.
And then I think we have time for maybe another one. This one I was wanting to know if funding can be obtained for public libraries to open after school programs.
Yes, it certainly can. So, community partnerships, again, as I mentioned, are really an important piece of this, especially that sustainability piece, right? So this funding does extend to 2023, 2024. But after that, there's that, need for these community partnerships to be able to be in the community to sustain these. And so I was just looking at an example from Vermont yesterday, where they have this library that was able to, open up a program and work with students and families in ways that they really hadn't before, get new library members, but also just really serve the academic and social needs of those two generations, students and their families at the same time, because that community-based funding was available. And so, your district can certainly partner with you as a library, which is an opportunity, but also remember there are those state and local government funds. And so you can reach out to, your county or somebody there and tell them about the work you're doing and access funds that way as well.
I do know that many, the county I live in, Kanawha County, the city of Charleston was asking for ideas because what to do with their pot of money that they received from the federal government. The county commission was doing the same thing. So even the school district was looking for what ways does the community want us to use these funds to improve community life as a whole. So I know contact all of your cities, your counties, your school districts, and have a conversation with them. Okay, we might be able to squeeze out this one because there is concern because these fundings will be ending. You have to obligate them in 2023, 2024, maybe longer. But what happens after all the funds are gone? What are things that people can do to maybe prepare for the time when we don't have these extra funds?
I like that question because we've been hearing that a lot. There is a caution when people get funds that if they spend them and they won't be able to spend them after some date, then there's almost no point in spending them on certain projects at all. And it's almost the opposite. So, one of the things we talk about at the federal level is that a lot of the larger funding streams that we now are using started off as pilot projects, started off as kind of short-term experiments that said, okay, let's give, a small amount of money to after school programs and see what happens if we create 21st century learning centers. And the success of that spirals from, I can't remember the initial allocation, 40 million to 1.2 billion, just enormous because of the success. So, you know, lean forward and use this moment as an opportunity to say, I need this money to pay my staff well, or to operate more programs in more spaces. Do the great work you do, and don't be frightened by the fact that, you know, the funding will run out, because that telling your story piece is so important. And if you combine the community partnership piece with the telling your story piece with all those available funds that we talked about from all the different federal funding streams, there really is an opportunity to do something great and show its value and sustain this for years to come and serve that huge amount of demand that we see across not just the state, but across the country.
Wonderful. Jillian, we appreciate you. Any final words that you would like to say before I switch this off to Susan Gamble for final comments?
No, just thank you all. I'm going to put my email in the chat also, so you can cut and paste. You can send me an email right now just to have it in your account. But we do want to be a resource. We're actually very close to West Virginia. I go there in an hour. So, you know, we're local, and we hope that we can continue to have these conversations. So thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you. Susan, back to you.
Thank you so much, Jillian and Sherry. We're just so grateful to have this dynamic and very important session this morning. And we really appreciate both of you being with us, Jillian for speaking and Sherry for moderating the session. Okay, as we wrap up this morning, I want to thank all of you for joining us for the 2021 West Virginia After School Conference. Just a reminder that we do still have 2 more workshop sessions today, and that we hope that you will continue to join us. Be sure to complete the conference evaluation. That is just so important for us as we are trying to discern what, you know, how effective or if what we provided for this conference was helpful for you. You can find that conference evaluation on the conference website. So be sure to go there to access it. And if you need West Virginia STARS hours, we're going to ask you to include your registry ID number in the evaluation, which helps provide proof of learning for the conference. So again, be sure to fill that out. Just a reminder, the on-demand video library is open and can be found on the conference website. And I just, before this is our last session today where we're all together, I just want to thank our sponsors, again, the Mott Foundation and Ms. by Mott. I also want to thank the West Virginia Department of Education 21st Century Community Learning Centers, as well as the West Virginia Department of Health and Human Resources Bureau for Children and Families on helping us to collaboratively put this event together for our state. This is the first time that we have done this on our own, not as part of the multi-state conference. And so we were just really excited to have so many of you join us. And again, I hope you'll continue to stay with us the rest of the morning. Have a great day, everyone.